In the case of the Gospel of Matthew, which is attributed to the Apostle Matthew, or in the case of the Gospel of John attributed to the Apostle John, neither of these texts says it was written by these people.
لاحظوا شيء مهم جدا، اتكلم على ايه؟ متى ويوحنا في الشهود عيان. لم يروا، ما حد حتى من مرقس ولوقا. نكمل.
And yet, from the very earliest references to them by name, they are ascribed to such figures. So if you ask, well, how did that happen? And the answer is, I don't know, nobody else knows for sure. It happened so early, but it appears to have been obviously something other than the text claiming it to be so and its claim being accepted. It appears to have been just a kind of tradition that was associated with these texts.
يعني ايه؟ شو بقى ماذا يقول يسوع؟ متى 15:9 وباطلا يعبدوني وهم يعلمون تعاليم هي وصايا الناس. تعاليم هم بيعتقدوا عن طريق الآباء، عن طريق التقليد، ان الكاتب هو تلميذ، بس تقليد بس. لكن في دليل؟ في تعليم الآباء، مش تعليم المسيح، مش تعليم الانجيل، تعليم الآباء. ولذلك يسوع يقول انهم بالباطل يعبدونني، فليس ما يعلمون من تعليم الا وصايا البشر. انجيل مادة 15:9 وباطلا يعبدوني وهم يعلمون تعليم هي وصايا البشر. اهو تعليم وصايا البشر. البابا شنودة اهو، شنودة هيربس، قداسة البابا هيربس. هذا هو التعليم الآبائي في موت الرب.
What about the Gospel of Thomas? The Gospel of Peter?
Yeah, Gospel of Peter, Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Mary, Gospel of Philip. All of these explicitly claim to be written by those figures, and these figures are, apostolic generation figures.
هذه الأناجيل بالذات أعلنت صراحة إن الكاتب هو تلاميذ المسيح، سواء إذا كان فيلم أو إذا كان مريم المجدلية أو إذا كان بطرس، بعكس الأناجيل اللي هم بيدعوا اللي هي تلاميذ المسيح اللي هو متى ويوحنا. شيم والله العظيم شيم.
And yet all four of them were not included in the canon. One of the things they had going against them was it appears that they were written actually, in their present form at least, significantly later than the canonical Gospels. They got a late start and they didn't make it. Those that had been written earlier and had more of a chance to circulate and to make their claim and to get that claim accepted, if they were able to do so, stood a better chance.
And so, very gradually, a consensus of opinion began to form. By the mid-2nd century, hundreds of churches across the Roman Empire had started to decide, informally at first, which texts were and which weren't to be included. For a number of books, the debates were relatively muted, but others generated considerable disagreement. The Shepherd of Hermas, a book of visions, was hugely popular in the early centuries of the Church, appearing in lists of accepted Christian literature until as late as the 5th century. And then suddenly it dropped out, judged to be too recent and written not by an apostle but only the brother of a bishop. Therefore not Holy Scripture. In the same way, the inclusion of Revelation, the last book of the New Testament, which describes the end of the world in vivid detail, wasn't a foregone conclusion.
روح عني أصلا شباب، أنت تضاف إلى قانونية الكتاب المقدس سنة 382 ميلادية في مؤتمر القسطنطينية، اللي هو رؤيا يوحنا اللاهوت. الكتاب كان مرفوض all the way، كانوا بيعتبروه هرتي هرطقة.
It seems impossible to imagine a canon without the horsemen of the apocalypse or 666, the number of the beast. But believe it or not, the book of Revelation nearly didn't make it. In the 4th century, bishops argued it should be omitted because of the difficulties involved in interpreting its complex symbolism. But it was saved at the last minute, when early Christian leaders became convinced that it was written by Jesus' disciple John, even though the author himself never made such a claim. So apostolic authorship, real or attributed, could be decisive. But so could a gospel's content. Bart Ehrman believes that unless a book helped ensure the fledgling faith's chances of survival, it didn't stand a chance. Would Christianity have been as successful a religion if the books that had been left out had been left in?
If Christianity had taken the books of the Ebionites, it would have been a Jewish canon that would have appealed to Jewish Christians.
في الحالة دي كانت قانونية الكتب هيبقى قانونية يهودية اللي هي تكون ملائمة لليهود.
But wouldn't have had widespread appeal to the Gentiles who made up the majority of the empire at the time. If Christianity had taken over the canon of Marcion, it would have excluded the Old Testament and wouldn't have had any claim to antiquity in a world in which antiquity was very important. People in the ancient world thought that for a religion to be true, it had to be ancient, and the Marcionite religion wasn't ancient. It was a new thing. The Gnostics had texts that were elitist in nature, where only the insiders could understand the truth that could bring about salvation.
لما موجود الكلام ده في الإنجيل، ارجعوا إلى إنجيل مرقس عندما قال يسوع للتلاميذ إن سر الملكوت سر أعطي لكم سر الملكوت ولكن بالخارج بالأمثال. ليه بالأمثال؟ ليه؟ حد يكتب النص يا شباب. أعطي لكم سر الملكوت للتلاميذ. طيب واللي بالخارج واللي غير تلميذ بالأمثال. ليه بالأمثال؟ حتى لا يفهموا. ارجعوا وتغفر خطيتهم. وتغفر خطيتهم. ثم هو متعمد إضلال الناس. متعمد إضلال الناس. أعطي لكم سر الملكوت لكن اللي بالخارج بالأمثال حتى لا يفهموا فيرجعوا وتغفر لهم خطاياهم. متعمد الضلال. انر سيكر بس يعني الناس اللي حوالين التلاميذ بس.
Christianity would have become a closed elitist society that wouldn't have had widespread appeal. My sense of things is that if Christianity hadn't formed an orthodoxy, a single coherent understanding of the faith with a canon of Scripture, that probably Christianity would not have taken over the Roman Empire.
So why was this emphasis on unity so important?
When the Roman Emperor Constantine converted to the faith in the year 312, he wanted to use this religion as a way of unifying his fragmented empire.
خلي بالكم يا اخوه دي misconception يعني سوء فهم وmisleading people كمان اضلال الناس. قسطنطين لم يتعمد ولم يقبل المسيحيه الا على فراش الموت. ومشكله بس اما دخل المسيحيه لم يدخلها في دين الرسول اثنيتيوس. لا اتعمد على مذهب اريوس وادي الدليل امامكم على الارض. ثواني اجيب لكم الدليل اهو. وهو على فراش الموت دخل على دين اريوس. ثواني امامكم امام كل الناس. ادخلوا الرابط كلكم شوفوا الرابط كله. لم يتنصر الا على فراش الموت. على فراش الموت من سنة 312 هي على دين أريوس اللي هو كان يؤمن المسيح هو عبد لله ليس هو الله ولا مثال الله ولا شريك له.
If Christianity were highly fragmented at the time of Constantine, then he wouldn't have seen the political value of committing himself to Christianity. And if Constantine hadn't converted to the faith, then the Roman Empire never would have converted to the faith, and we never would have had Western Christianity.
Perhaps then it was inevitable that texts supported by the Roman churches had the edge over those championed by churches further afield. They were the ones with the power and the money to make a difference. The Gospel of Thomas may have been very popular in Egypt, but without the backing of Rome, it was unlikely to win through. So not surprisingly, texts written in Rome, like the Gospel of Mark, became more popular. Being in the right place at the right time certainly helped ensure your inclusion in the New Testament.
ما في كلام ولا في روح قدس ولا إلهام من عند الله ولا الاختيار تم عن طريق. ما في الكلام ده كله مش موجود.
By the end of the 2nd century, signs of concerted efforts to promote certain books and not others began to emerge. These range from Athanasius' letter urging his congregation not to read erroneous literature to tales from the church fathers of bishops charging halfway across Europe to stop the circulation of heretical texts. The next 300 years would see the emergence and enforcement of an official Christian book list of accepted works, a canon. It was a process which proved so effective that only traces of those Gospels, well loved by the Docetics, the Gnostics, and the Marcionite Christians, still remain. And perhaps the reason why so many of these writings have been lost to us altogether is because it is inevitably the winners who write history. The losers of that process drift from our memory.